Coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline, eliminating Syria's weapons of war. Israel destroys Syria's navy, the bulk of its weapons and military assets. And fighting for freedom. The people of northeast Syria call for support in their struggle to defend themselves. Plus, striking Iran's nuclear assets. Could Israel have entered a strategic window of opportunity? All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. This week, in a stunning reversal of its 2018 decision to relocate its embassy out of Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, Paraguay reopened its Jerusalem embassy. The move reestablished relations between Israel and Paraguay and was met with warm speeches in the Knesset by Prime Minister Netanyahu and Paraguayan President Santiago Peña.
Alongside the series of agreements that will be signed during this visit, something no less central is happening. Your courageous promise, my friend the President, to move the Paraguayan embassy to Jerusalem begins to take shape, and you deserve every blessing.
So I say here today that without an embassy in Jerusalem, diplomatic relations with Israel do not have a real heart, do not have a real soul. With this move, our historic friendship will once again have the palpitating heart.
The Friends of Zion Museum hosted a reception in President Peña's honor, celebrating the new embassy and the show of support it symbolizes for Israel. Jerusalem leaders, including the mayor of Jerusalem, Knesset members, and members of the diplomatic community, celebrated Paraguay's decision to relocate the embassy to Jerusalem. President Peña was also presented with the Friends of Zion Award.
And to have a world leader stand up in the middle of a war and say, I'm not just standing by Israel's side, I'm going to stand by your side right now. I'm going to fly to Israel in the middle of a war, bring my top leadership delegations, and I'm going to move our embassy to Jerusalem, Israel's eternal, undivided capital. I don't think you can get a better statement than that.
I came to Israel holding a message. This is the message of entire country, that beyond my own belief, they have asked me that we remain close to Israel.
We will enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Those are the words of the Islamic rebels who recently took control of Syria, and they reveal their ultimate goal, Jerusalem. It's one reason Israeli forces struck hundreds of targets in Syria, destroying most of its military infrastructure. In a 48-hour bombing campaign, the IDF says it has destroyed up to 80% of Syria's military capability. Named Bashan Arrow after the biblical name for the Golan Heights, the IDF hit more than 300 targets throughout Syria.
The IDF has been working in Syria in recent days to damage and destroy strategic capabilities that threaten the state of Israel. The Navy worked tonight to destroy the Syrian fleet, and with great success.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu authorized the strikes to keep Syria's military assets from Israel's new jihadist neighbors, and he sent them a warning.
We want relations with the new regime in Syria, but if this regime allows Iran to reestablish itself in Syria, or allows the transfer of Iranian weapons or any other weapons to Hezbollah, or attacks us, we will respond forcefully and we will exact a heavy price from it. What happened to the previous regime will also happen to this regime.
Inside Syria, the former government of Bashar Assad says it will transfer power to Syria's new leader, who pledged no new war.
The regime is now gone, thanks to God, and the country is moving towards development and reconstruction. It's going towards stability. People are exhausted from war, so the country isn't ready for another, and it's not going to get into another one.
But the Middle East Media Research Institute released this video of HTS fighters pledging Damascus is simply a stepping stone.
Just like that, Allah willing, we will enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Prophet's Mosque, and the Kaaba. We will enter these, Allah willing.
It's a goal HTS leader Mohammed al-Golani shared in this 2018 video.
Allah willing, we will reach not only Damascus, Jerusalem awaits us as well.
Charmaine Heading, founder of the Shai Fund, currently helping Christians inside Syria, says it's important to know the history of these new powers in Syria.
We're watching these two groups that have taken over Syria, the HTS, which is run by Gilani, who's formerly part of Jabhat al-Nusra, which is Al-Qaeda, and the SNA, which is a coalition of forces but has a lot of ISIS veterans in them. And both of these groups are somehow funded by Turkey and have both got major human rights records.
It's why Heading and many human rights groups are deeply concerned for the future of Christians and other minority groups inside Syria. According to multiple reports, the IDF believes the success of a potential attack against Iran has greatly improved after its recent strikes inside Syria. And after more than a year, Israel and Hamas may also be on the verge of striking a deal to free some of the hostages, including Americans. With Iran and Hezbollah dramatically weakened, Israeli and U.S. leaders believe Hamas may be prepared to reach a hostage deal.
For months, we believe Hamas was waiting for lots of other actors and forces to come to their rescue, to come to their aid.
Now Hamas may realize their allies, Iran and Hezbollah, aren't strong enough to save them.
Hamas has got to be looking out at the world today and realizing that the cavalry's not coming to rescue them.
After days of attacks, Israel has destroyed most of Syria's air defenses, one of the region's best. Now the Israel Defense Forces see an opportunity to attack Iran's nuclear sites with far less danger, since the straightest route to Iran is across Syria.
Israel has a window to go attack and destroy all of Iran's nuclear weapons facilities now.
On Thursday, for the third time in recent months, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu once again spoke directly to the Iranian people. Some believe it appears an attempt to encourage them to overthrow the regime that's oppressed and impoverished them.
You know what this regime is truly terrified of? It's terrified of you, the people of Iran. And one day, I know that, one day this will change. One day Iran will be free.
Netanyahu pointed out how the Islamic regime wasted the Iranian people's money.
Your oppressors spent over $30 billion supporting Assad in Syria. Today, after only 11 days of fighting, his regime collapsed into the dust.
This evil regime are so brutal. They are killing people. There are hundreds of thousands of people are in prisons. They execute people. Just this year, they executed about thousands of people.
The Iranian government arrested Iranian-born Marzi Amirizadeh and sentenced her to death, but released her after international pressure. She writes her story in her book, A Love Journey with God, and told CBN News what Iranians are telling her.
I hear many good messages from Iran that how much Iranians are tired of the Islamic Republic regime. They are tired of Islam.
One day Iran will be free. Women, life, freedom, zan, zandagi, azadi. That is the future of Iran. That is the future of peace. And I have no doubt that we will realize that future together a lot sooner than people think.
Amirizadeh says it's important for Christians to pray for the people of Iran.
We can pray for the fall of this regime, that finally Iranians get back their freedom, but above that, the most important thing that's my prayer for the kingdom of God come to Iran and Iranians find the truth through Jesus Christ.
Amen. Coming up, a small pocket of democracy in northeast Syria under attack from Turkey. Just days after the fall of the Assad government in Syria, the region is adjusting to new realities on the ground. One area on the border with Turkey could be ground zero for a battle between Western values and Islamic ambitions. It's an area where Christians from many ethnic groups live. Here's the latest. While the leader of the main faction of Syria's rebel forces is pledging no new war, a democratic enclave in northeast Syria that's home to Kurds, Yazidis, and Christians, is being attacked by a proxy army of Turkey. CBN News spoke with a Christian from northeast Syria by phone. To protect his identity, we've disguised his voice and can't show his face. We're calling him Gabriel.
So, yeah, we are under attack, and we don't think that Erdogan and his proxies are going to stop in this place in the north.
The autonomous administration in northeast Syria is unique in all of the Middle East. CBN News reported on this new government back in this 2019 report.
It's completely new in the Middle East, and I'd say it's completely new in the whole world.
Freelance journalist Carlos Zurituza has covered this new government for several years.
What these people are actually doing is rebuilding themselves, starting from scratch after decades of repression by the Assad regime. So literally from day one, since 2012, since they liberated their territories, they are in the process of reconstructing civil society, integrating different components in the region, not just Kurds, it's Arabs, Armenians, Syriacs.
During the war to defeat ISIS, the autonomous administration partnered with the U.S. and allied forces.
They are more similar in human rights to what we believe in the West, and critically, they have freedom of religion and belief and an overrepresentation of religious minorities. So what's happened is they stand in direct opposition to these jihadi Islamist groups, HTS and SNA. And so today we are seeing the SNA is being used as the militia to break down and attack northeast Syria.
The autonomous administration fears the Turkish government of President Erdogan, who has stated his intention to defeat the Kurds of northeast Syria. Given the attacks by Turkish-backed forces and Erdogan's threats, the people of northeast Syria are calling out to the U.S., the West, and the Christian world for help.
We call on all the Christians in the world to call their nations and brothers and sisters in their administration to make the Christian, the Kurds and Druze and all the minorities to be able to protect themselves from these kind of atrocities.
Gabriel says northeast Syria is not asking for foreign troops, but for the resources to defend themselves.
Especially the Trump administration and the Israeli government to make this happen, because Christians all over Syria, Christians all over Lebanon, all over Iraq, they want to survive.
Heading believes it's important to pray for this fledgling Middle East democracy.
Because in this area, you have people who can believe whatever they want. Christians, Yazidis, even Muslim background believers who have come to faith in Jesus are able to practice their religion in this area. So pray for northeast Syria, that it'll remain stable and that the international community would stand and back northeast Syria against these Islamist jihadis.
Following up on our subject of northeast Syria, we bring you more of our interview with Charmaine Heading from the Shai Fund. She's worked in the Middle East for decades and is very familiar with the rebel groups in play in Syria. I asked her to fill us in. Charmaine Heading, founder of the Shai Fund, thanks so much for joining us. You really are involved in what's happening there in Syria right now. For those that are just seeing the news but not sure exactly what's happening, how would you paint a picture of what's happening in Syria right now?
So I think, Chris, we're very cautious at the moment. On one hand, we're watching all of these prisoners coming out of the prisons that the Assad regime put for 40 years plus, and we know that he killed over 600,000 of his people. 6 million were displaced and are abroad, some of them. And then on the other hand, we're watching these two groups that have taken over Syria, the HTS, which is run by Gilani, who's formerly part of Jabhat al-Nusra, which is Al-Qaeda, and the SNA, which is a coalition of forces but has a lot of ISIS veterans. And both of these groups are somehow funded by Turkey and have both got major human rights records. So cautious, optimistic might be a bit too much.
And so these groups, the HTS and the SNA, how dangerous can they be? Could they be?
Well, when you look at what the HTS did, for example, in Idlib, we saw major human rights abuses on the Druze, the Christians, the Yazidis, and Shiite minorities. And for example, the Christian community was over 10,000. HTS came in, implemented Sharia law. There's less than 300 now. And when we look at what the SNA is doing, the Syrian National Army, which is a weird name because it's not the National Army, it's actually a Turkish-funded proxy militia, we understand that they are committing major human rights abuses, and we've just seen a report come out in the last 12 hours documenting some of these abuses of the people that have fled Afrin into the Shaba region and now are fleeing again.
And they're heading to northeast Syria. Now, one part of Syria that people may not be aware of, northeast Syria is actually a fairly democratic area where there's religious freedom, and people are heading there. Is that area in danger right now?
So yes, so the remarkable thing about northeast Syria is when the coalition forces looked around to find a partner to combat the Islamic State, they asked Turkey and Turkey refused, and we found out later actually backed a lot of the ISIS fighters and supported them. And then they ended up in northeast Syria. Why? Because in 2012, northeast Syria designed this good governance, the social contract between the people and the government of northeast Syria, where they have inclusiveness, participation.
It's a critical time right now, and things are so uncertain and shifting. But how can people pray, and how can people perhaps affect policy right now?
So, first of all, I would pray for northeast Syria. Also pray that when the whole of Syria will be able to have a representation of Syria and not just radical Islamic policies and style of government, that it will actually be more representational, because we know, for example, that there are Yazidis, there's Kurds, there's Christians. Aleppo is one of the oldest Christian cities in the world, and there's 2,000 years of history of Christians in this area.
Great points for prayer, and thanks for giving us an analysis to help understand what's actually happening in Syria that is so important right now. Thanks, Charmaine.
Thanks, Chris.
Up next, author Joel Rosenberg on a new dynamic in the Middle East and what it could mean for Iran. With just about a month before his inauguration, many are wondering what kind of Middle East policy President-elect Trump will enact. I spoke with Joel Rosenberg, author and editor of All Israel News, to get his perspective. Iran's supreme leader recently called for the assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
What the Israelis did is not victory, it's a war crime. Netanyahu's arrest warrant has been issued, but this is not enough. An execution sentence for Netanyahu must be issued.
Khamenei also denied that Israel defeated his allies, Hamas and Hezbollah.
These are not victories. The enemy didn't win in Gaza. The enemy didn't win in Lebanon. The enemy won't win in Gaza and Lebanon.
I think the most terrified world leader on this planet right now is the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei. I think the happiest world leader on the planet right now is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu has a friend coming back into the White House in Donald Trump.
Joel Rosenberg of All Israel News says Trump's victory changes the dynamic between Israel and Iran.
The supreme leader of Iran has got to be shaking in his sandals, right? Because Trump is going to be very tough on the Iranian regime. He's already signaling that he's going to reapply a very severe maximum pressure campaign of severe economic sanctions to bring the Iranian regime to its knees economically.
A new report from the Middle East Forum predicts Trump will pursue an enhanced version of the maximum pressure campaign with the explicit goal of regime change in Tehran. Rosenberg says Trump's likely national security team of Marco Rubio as Secretary of State, Elise Stefanik as UN ambassador, and Mike Huckabee as ambassador to Israel sends a major statement to Tehran. They share the common denominator of being hawkish on Iran. Rosenberg believes Israel could now have a window to go after Iran's nuclear facilities.
Now, Netanyahu may say he's going to wait for Trump's maximum pressure campaign. But let's be clear. Netanyahu and the IDF have taken out most of Hezbollah's missiles and all of the Hamas terror infrastructure. Suddenly, Iran's right and left arms are cut off, and Israel took out the missile defense systems, the air defense systems around Tehran in its last attack. So the pathway is clear.
Given this question of whether the situation could escalate before Trump's inauguration, Rosenberg says it's a critical time to pray.
I think in the next 2 months, the most dangerous place to be is between Tel Aviv and Tehran, because Iran could launch a massive strike, or Israel could, or they both could. I actually don't know, and it's why we need to all be praying as Christians for the peace of Jerusalem like never before.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember to follow us on social media, and you can access CBN content through our CBN apps. And please keep praying for the hostages, for the peace of Jerusalem, and for all of us here in the Jerusalem Bureau. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.